If a big UFO came now, we walk outside and over Westminster, there's a spaceship hovering. I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised, because I know that there are trillions of planets in the Milky Way galaxy alone and hundreds of billions of stars, and there's been a lot of time. And one of the great mysteries, actually, in physics is why we don't seem to see much out there, anything. We haven't, there's strong evidence of nothing out there at all at the moment. We have no strong evidence of any life beyond Earth. And that's a puzzle and a paradox. With those claims, you don't rule them out. If someone says, well, I found this thing at the bottom of the sea and I think it's really weird, then the correct thing to do is go, okay, we'll put it in a lab and get an electron microscope and prod it around and find out just how weird it is. And nature, Feynman again said, the thing to remember is nature does not care at all what you think. Nature just doesn't. It doesn't matter who you are or how famous you are, how many letters you've got before or after your name, whatever. It doesn't matter. Nature just is. So if indeed an alien spacecraft crashed into wherever it was that they found these things 1 billion years ago and left all the fragments there and we've dug them up, then that's interesting. I was asked to give a talk at the COP Climate Summit in Glasgow just by video, 1 minute. And it was a little project. And they said, if you could say anything to the world leaders there, what would you say? And I said, just very simply, that given what I know, and given a lot of people I've spoken to, it's possible that we're the only civilization in the Milky Way galaxy at the moment. Right? It's worth considering that might be the case. So if it's true, imagine it's true, I think that if we're talking about the meaning of it all, as we talked about earlier, what does it mean to be a human in this universe? Well, meaning is a property of intelligence, I think. So clearly the universe means something to us. So meaning exists here. But if there's no other intelligence out there in our galaxy and we destroy ourselves, then we might eliminate meaning in a galaxy of 400 billion stars forever. That's what we might do. So consider that, world leaders. You have potentially a galactic size responsibility to maintain meaning in a galaxy. That's why it bothers me, because I think that's true. So I think what we do here will have ramifications in that sense way beyond the shores of our own planet, because a lifeless world, a lifeless galaxy is a meaningless galaxy.
You familiar with the Fermi paradox and the Great Filter?
No.
Okay, so Enrico Fermi, great, amazing physicist, posed a very simple question. He said, where are the aliens? Because we've seen no sign of them. Now, a lot of people think they've seen signs of aliens. I have seen no evidence whatsoever of aliens. So it's a troubling question. Why not? So one of the answers, perhaps the most likely answer, is that we're it. That the tiny candle of consciousness that constitutes humanity is all that there is in this vast darkness. And I think we should assume that that is the case until we actually have firm evidence to the contrary. And moreover, human consciousness only arose after 4.5 billion years. It took a long time. And if it had taken even 10% longer, it probably would not have evolved, because the sun is expanding. As the sun expands, it'll start heating Earth, and the oceans will evaporate. We'll become more like Venus, inhospitable to life. So I think we may have achieved consciousness, or consciousness that's capable of developing technology, just in time. I find it remarkable that we are at this point in history where we are able, for the first time, to go beyond Earth, to send people. We sent people to the moon in the early 70s, but have since not gone back. But with the Starship rocket that SpaceX is developing, we've had 2 test flights, we'll have many more this year. That vehicle is designed to make life multiplanetary. It's the first vehicle that is capable of doing that. A permanent base on the moon and a city on Mars. So I think we want to get that done as soon as possible. The window of opportunity to make life multiplanetary and secure the future of consciousness may be open for a long time, or it may be open for a short time. I think it would be wise to not assume that it'll be open for a long time. Act now to make life multiplanetary.
I have yet to see any actual evidence of aliens, and I'm really deep in space. Yeah. If there is some actual evidence of aliens or an actual UFO, I'll be there in a second. I mean, obviously we're going to It's like, are we talking about bodies here? Or like, is it a UFO? Is it advanced technology? I mean, that would be very, very interesting. And hopefully they're friendly. If they manage to get all the way here from another star system, I mean, their technology is going to be far, I mean, we'll be primitive compared to them, So, but I also think, like, if there aren't aliens, or that's actually perhaps even a bigger concern, because if there actually aren't aliens in our galaxy or anywhere near us, then effectively this consciousness on planet Earth is, the light of consciousness is like, it's like a tiny candle in a vast darkness, and a fragile candle, and we should just do everything we can to make sure it does not go out.
The way I see it is very differently. If they are able to reach our doorstep, you have to realize that the nearest star is 4 light years away, and a typical star in the Milky Way galaxy is tens of thousands of light years away. So even if you move at the speed of light, to cross the Milky Way galaxy takes tens of thousands of years. And if you use rockets of the type that we used so far for space exploration, and that includes Starship, that is being built right now by SpaceX, those rockets move at a speed that is 10,000 times slower than the speed of light. So to move from one side of the galaxy to the other side takes almost 1 billion years. 1 billion years for that journey. It's a major engineering undertaking to traverse the distances between stars. So if you imagine a neighbor reaching us, long before we were able to reach that neighbor, it means that the neighbor is far more sophisticated, ahead of us, started developing science and technology and launching well before we did. We started doing it only over the past century. And just imagine another civilization that did it for 1,000 years, for 10,000 years. They would be far more advanced than we are. Also, since the journey takes a long time, they didn't have us in mind when they embarked on a journey towards Earth, because we were indistinguishable from nature if you go back more than 10,000 years ago. And therefore, if they arrive here, it's not because of us. We tend to think everything is centered on us, and visitors come here just because they know what is happening here. No, that's not the case, because the journey is so long and they are so much more sophisticated, they wouldn't care much about us. And it's actually an opportunity for us to learn about future technologies that they possess, and it would take us a long time to develop ourselves. So for us, it will be a learning experience, and I see it as in a very positive way. We probably resemble, ants on the cracks of a pavement. When a biker passes by, the biker doesn't really care much about us. And, it's clear that we are not that important, because humans came to exist on Earth only over the past few million years, okay? And at first, of course, they looked just like animals. And a few million years is only one part in a few thousand of the age of the Earth, okay? So it's just at the end of the history. And moreover, the Earth itself is not at the center of the universe. We know that. So if you arrive to a cosmic play and you are not at the center of stage, and you are also arriving at the end of the play is not about you. And yet we keep thinking about it as if it's all about us. No, it's not. We are insignificant. We just developed modern science over the past 100 years. Quantum mechanics was discovered a century ago. And all the gadgets that we use right now to communicate, the two of us are speaking through electronics that relies on quantum mechanics. This was not possible more than a century ago. And just think about what would happen a century from now, or 1,000 years from now in terms of our development. They may have already done that. And as a result, I see it more as a way of us to learn, to appreciate. In fact, if we meet a technological gadget that is so much more sophisticated than what we possess, it will appear to us like a miracle. In the Bible, there is this story about Moses witnessing a burning bush that was not consumed. And of course, nowadays, we could have bought such an electric device and put it in front of Moses back then, and Moses would have been struck and would have believed that it was produced by a superhuman entity. That's what convinced Moses that God exists. But if I were next to Moses using the Galileo project instruments, I would have been able to tell what the temperature of the bush is, how much energy is emitted per time, and figure out whether indeed it's manufactured by some advanced civilization. So what I'm saying is that a very sophisticated and advanced scientific civilization is a good approximation to God. It's a way of unifying, for us, unifying the sense we have about religion. We would be filled with religious awe when we encounter technological gadget that we cannot figure out because it's so much more advanced, using physics that we don't know.
So let me ask, are we alone?
That's an excellent question. For me, the answer is sort of clear because I start from the principle of modesty. You know, if we believe that we are alone and special and unique, that shows arrogance. My daughters, when they were infants, they tended to think that they are special, unique, and then they went out to the street and realized that other kids are very much like them, and then they developed a sense of a better perspective about themselves. And I think the only reason that we are still thinking that we are special is because we haven't searched well enough to find others that might even be better than us. And, you know, I say that because I look at the newspaper every morning and I see that we do foolish things. We are not necessarily the most intelligent ones. And if you think about it, if you open a recipe book, you see that out of the same ingredients, you can make very different cakes, depending on how you put them together and how you heat them up. And what is the chance that by taking the soup of chemicals that existed on Earth and cooking it one way to get our life, that you got the best cake possible? I mean, we are probably not the sharpest cookie in the jar. And my question is, I mean, it's pretty obvious to me that we are probably not alone, because half of all the sun-like stars we know now as astronomers, half of the sun-like stars from the Kepler satellite data have a planet the size of the Earth, roughly at the same distance that the Earth is from the sun. And that means that they can have liquid water on their surface and the chemistry of life as we know it. So if you roll the dice billions of times just within the Milky Way galaxy, and then you have tens of billions of galaxies like it within the observable volume of the universe, it would be extremely arrogant to think that we are special. I would think that we are sort of middle of the road, typical forms of life. So nobody cares about us. We tend to think that we are special, but that's a sign of immaturity.
And we're very early on in our development.
Yes, that's another thing, that we have our technology only for 100 years, and it's evolving exponentially right now on a 3-year time scale. So imagine what would happen in 100 years, in 1,000 years, in 1,000,000 years, or in 1,000,000,000 years. Now, the sun is actually relatively late in the star formation history of the universe. Most of the sun-like stars formed earlier, and some of them already died, became white dwarfs. And so if you imagine that a civilization like ours existed around a typical sun-like star, by now, if they survived, they could be 1 billion years old. And then imagine 1 billion-year technology. It would look like magic to us. An approximation to God. We wouldn't be able to understand it. And so, in my view, we should be humble. And by the way, we should probably just listen and not speak, because there is a risk, right? If you are inferior, there is a risk. If you speak too loudly, something bad may happen to you.
If there are other civilizations which are older than our own and have got much further than we have, they must have very advanced technologies. And I wonder what forms these technologies take.
Well, again, very difficult to estimate, but there are stars which are billions of years older than our sun. Some of them very likely have planets, and therefore I can imagine civilizations immensely beyond the capabilities of our own. What capabilities those are, no one can tell, in the same sense that even the most fantastic prognostications from the middle of the 19th century about the technology of the 20th century all fell short. People like Jules Verne, asked to imagine what transportation devices people would have in 1950, imagined a kind of Victorian living room,
yes,
with plush velvet furniture in a gondola at the bottom of an enormous balloon which went from New York to San Francisco in only a few weeks. And he was, of course, the most imaginative speculative thinker of the 19th century. Others would have been more cautious. So it's very difficult to predict far into the future, even 100 years, when not only new technology, but new scientific principles may be discovered.
So far, we've been talking about contact either by radio or direct physical contact by space probes. But there might be other means of doing it. It does, I know, sound very like science fiction to talk about teleportation or thought travel. But do you think this is entirely out of the question at the moment? And if so, should we be considering it seriously?
Well, there's very little in science which is absolutely out of the question, but I don't know of any evidence which suggests that we should invest a lot of time and money on those particular ventures, although I would not oppose anyone who thought that it was a useful investment of his time.
Then what should we be doing about this research?
I would say that there are several lines of approach, all of which look promising and should be pursued further. One is laboratory work on the question of the origin of life, making the molecules which here were able to reproduce themselves and led eventually to us. Secondly, a study of the organic chemistry in places like Jupiter, comets, and the interstellar medium. It's remarkable that the molecules of life are littering the cosmos. Thirdly, the space vehicle exploration of the neighboring planets, in particular for life or life-related compounds. If it turns out, for example, that Mars is lifeless, that is not a major disappointment, because then we have two planets near each other in space and time, life developed on one and not on the other. You have the classic case of an experiment and a control. And it would be very important to investigate why life on the Earth and not on Mars. But even more exciting would be if Mars turns out to have life, for us to investigate what kind of life it is, how similar, how different from life on Earth. That will immensely broaden the science of biology. There's not a single verified or checked out report which is at all connectable with the possibility of extraterrestrial life. It doesn't say that I think extraterrestrial life is impossible. Quite the contrary. I think that many of the stars in the sky have planetary systems. We know enough now about the origin of life to make it appear likely that life arises naturally on the vast bulk of these planets. It's possible, but by no means certain, that life on many of these planets evolves into beings which are as advanced as we, or more advanced. And I don't see any reason why we can't imagine that there are civilizations thousands or millions of years in advance of ourselves capable of technical feats that we can hardly imagine.
People have come to equate UFOs with aliens, which is a curious equation in our brains, because it goes something like this. There are lights in the sky doing something I've never seen anything do before. I can't explain it. I don't know what it is. Therefore, it's a visiting alien from another planet. So what we tend to do is explain away our ignorance with aliens. Now, that's just intellectually lazy. Aliens can't have done all of that. It happens on many levels. The people who see the pyramids, and rather than credit the African culture who created them, because you don't know how somebody did it thousands of years ago, you can't figure it out, and you're not giving them the intellectual credit for having accomplished it, so you say, aliens helped them. It's a common sort of fallback position. What I would say is, as a scientist, you learn to embrace the unknown. You encounter something, you don't know what it is, I want to find out more. And you don't assert that you know what it is after you've just admitted you don't know what it is. You don't know what it is? Let's perform more experiments. Let's get better data. Let's keep investigating it. But first of all, I love me some aliens. And nobody doesn't love the aliens.
Okay.
Right? That would be a discovery of all of civilization. If aliens showed up and we sat down and had tea with them. How many photographs are taken every day? Everybody's got a smartphone, right? Almost everybody. High resolution. And if you're not taking a photo, you're taking a video. And so if there's something unusual and interesting, you're taking a video of that. We have video of stuff you never got videos of before. So you'd think an alien encounter would be rare, but you've got a smartphone and you can stream it. In the old days, when people said, did you take pictures of the alien that abducted you? Yeah, but they stole the film. Or I got the film home and the whole roll was blank because the alien zapped it or whatever. So it's a recording device, but a streaming device is not a recording device. So you can live stream whatever is happening, all right? So you would expect, given how many reports of abductions there were,
Right.
of decades past, that somebody would have that on, that'd be posted by now, and it hasn't been. So this leads me to think strongly that people's imaginations got the better side of their life experience when they came back to report on having been abducted. Okay, so there's that. So that's aliens. That's just aliens. But how about UFOs? So you see something flying, and it's something you don't know what it is. And let me just say, I was going to tweet this too. Maybe I should. I was going to say, the fact that you don't know what it is not evidence that you know what it is.
First, tell us what the purpose of the program was and why it was so secretive.
Sure. The purpose of the program, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, was really designed to do just that. From a national security perspective, identify those things that we see, whether we see them electro-optically, we see them with radar, we see them as eyewitness reports, through a myriad of different ways and avenues that we receive the information, and try to ascertain and determine if that information is a potential threat to national security, in a nutshell.
So what did you find?
Well, we found a lot. I think it's probably been a little bit mischaracterized in some of the social media you see and what people put out, because a lot of times when we don't have a lot of information, we tend to fill in those gaps with what we think is logical. And there's still, by the way, a lot we really don't know. I think what's important is that we have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft. Let's call them aircraft. Things that don't have any obvious flight surfaces, any obvious forms of propulsion, and maneuvering in ways that include extreme maneuverability beyond, I would submit, the healthy G-forces of a human or anything biological, hypersonic velocities, low observability, positive lift, again, seemingly defying the laws of aerodynamics. So people are talking.
So do you think, I know, but do you believe, when you get that Navy pilot saying what he said, do you think that was, a UFO? To obviously I don't have any other word to use, or that, or something else?
Sure, that's a great question. Keeping in mind, it's not just the pilot's testimony on observation. Sure, when someone comes to you who's in charge of a multi-million-dollar weapon platform, who maintains a top secret security clearance, who is paid and trusted by this country to go fight wars and to fly over cities with live munitions, and by the way, they're trained observers with millions of dollars invested in their training.
Yep.
I would submit to you it's pretty compelling, but on top of that, it's not just the eyewitness testimony. It is actual electro-optical data and radar returns. It's also people like radar operators and air traffic controllers. So I think the discussion should be maybe a little bit broader than that. I think people are focusing just on 2 videos coming from a set of F-18s when really it's a lot more than that.